When Stephen Fleming was found to have thrown the body of Annette Brennan in a wheelie bin to be taken out like rubbish, he initially pled not guilty. Now behind bars, Fleming has since admitted to killing Miss Brennan and has been sentenced to a shockingly small jail term. So, what were the circumstances that led to this perpetrator being found guilty? And more importantly, why was such a lenient sentence handed down? Let's see if we can find out. Welcome everybody to 5 Seconds to Sundown. I'm your host, Gemma. If you've come over from the old channel, I Think My Fridge is Haunted, thank you so much for your support. Thank you so much for joining me over here. And if you're new here, this is where I talk about all things weird and interesting. All of my favorite subjects, including crime and justice, dark history, and the occasional ghost story. If you haven't already, please follow me on YouTube and on Instagram. That's at 5 Seconds to Sundown. Now on to the story. This episode includes distressing content, so please take care while listening. Today's episode is a tough one, and not just because it's sensational or because it took place in my city, but because it involves such a profound betrayal of kindness. This is the story of Annette Brennan, a 67-year-old English teacher who dedicated her life to helping new arrivals to Australia. She helped them to learn the language and find their feet. She was a woman described by her students as a second mum, but she was also a woman who opened her home to someone that she barely knew, and for that generosity, she paid the ultimate price. The other person in this story is a man by the name of Stephen Fleming, and he's a man with a long criminal history. He moved into Annette's home, lived with her for only a few weeks, and then he killed her. What he did next was stuff her body into a wheelie bin before pretending that nothing had ever happened. Before we get into the timeline of this crime, I want to start with Annette herself. Annette Brennan was a 67-year-old English teacher living in Coolaroo in Melbourne's north. She worked not only as a teacher, but also as a tutor for new migrants and refugees. People who knew her described her as loving, warm, patient, and incredibly dedicated. Her friends and former students spoke about her like she was family. She'd help people find jobs, practice their English, and settle into their new lives in Australia. Annette had only just moved into the house she was living in a couple of months before she was killed. It was a single-story, suburban brick home, which had a spare room. So, like a lot of people living alone, she decided to put an ad on flatmates.com.au. She just wanted someone to help cover rent. And that is what brought Stephen Fleming into Annette's life. So who is Stephen Fleming? Stephen Fleming was 47 years old at the time of the killing, and unfortunately he came with a long criminal history involving drugs and motor vehicle offences. Fleming was not a stable person. In fact, he was on a community corrections order at the time he moved in with Annette. He had trouble holding down jobs and had been in and out of the legal system, and he seems to have lived a chaotic, transient lifestyle. Before answering the housemate ad, he had no connection to Annette. They had no friends or family in common. So there's no way that Annette could have known that he had a criminal history. He moved into Annette's house on June 6th, 2024. And within weeks, the situation just deteriorated. From the outside looking in, it's easy to assume that if someone moves into your home and starts causing trouble, you can just kick them out. But anyone who's dealt with a bad housemate knows that it's really not that simple. If you ever watched that show, I think it's called World's Worst Housemates, so scary. After moving in, Stephen Fleming didn't pay his rent. Annette told her friends that he had started stealing or removing items from the house. He yelled at Annette and caused disturbances, which no one wants. He was threatening and unpredictable. So Annette confided in her friends about what was happening at her house. She told people he needs to go. These are all classic signs of a housemate situation turning dangerous. Annette had a sense that Stephen wasn't just an irritating housemate. He was causing a real problem and may have been a threat to her safety. Unfortunately, Annette was living alone with Stephen Fleming, so whatever arguments or tension were taking place inside that house, we will likely never know the details of because of what happened next. Let's walk through the timeline of the crime step by step because the details of this case are really important. On June 6, 2024, Stephen Fleming moves into the house. As I said before, Annette rents out a room through flatmates.com.au. Fleming moves in, and it seems polite at first, but within days he's creating problems. Annette expresses to friends that he hasn't paid rent and is acting in strange confrontational ways. She's definitely seeing red flags. By late June 2024, only 3 weeks after Stephen moves in, Annette is becoming increasingly uncomfortable. She voices concerns about Fleming's behaviour. She's decided she wants him out of the house. I don't blame her. Fleming, meanwhile, is causing drama behind the scenes. He's contacting their landlord, he's taking items from the home, and he's refusing to leave. This must have been incredibly stressful for Annette. She's opened her home to someone during a housing crisis. She knows it's been tough out there for people to find a place to live these days. Furthermore, she's taken a chance on someone that she wants to see the best in, because she's a nice person. Then we come to July 1st, 2024, and this is the date believed to be the day that Annette Brennan is murdered by Stephen Fleming. We don't know exactly what happened, and we don't know what weapon, if any, was used. We also don't know whether it was a murder urged on by an argument or something that was previously planned. And tragically, we don't even know Annette's cause of death at all, because by the time her body was found, it had been severely damaged. But what we do know is this. Sometime on July 1st, Stephen Fleming killed Annette Brennan inside her own home. And instead of calling for help, instead of alerting anyone, instead of showing even a shred of humanity, he put her body into a green waste wheelie bin. And in Australia, we have these bins meant for garden clippings, when you mow the lawn, that kind of thing. These bins are routinely picked up by the council. So what we're looking at is a crime where not only was this innocent person killed, but her remains were treated like rubbish. It's such a calculated and dehumanizing act. Let's move on to the coming days, July 1st to the 3rd, 2024. The level of calculated effort here on Fleming's part is significant. After killing her, Stephen Fleming thoroughly cleaned the house to destroy evidence. He scrubbed surfaces, he removed any biological traces, and he moved items around, I guess to mask any sign of a struggle. Then he rolled the green waste bin outside to the side of the road. But not outside Annette's house. No. He swapped Annette's bin with the neighbour's bin and placed that one out the front of Annette's house, meaning that Annette's body was now outside the neighbour's home. Fleming then left the home entirely and moved into another house within just a few days. And I think you can agree that it's chilling how quickly and casually he tried to cover his tracks and carry on with life. Let's go to July 3rd, 2024. This part of the story is quite horrific. A green waste truck collected the bins on Annette's street. It travelled about 8 kilometres to the Repurpose It waste facility in Epping. Workers were moving mounds of green waste when they made the horrifying discovery. Annette's body was found, and of course, spare a thought for the workers who made that discovery. It's something that no person should ever have to see when they're just going to work. Annette's remains were badly damaged, largely because of the mechanised compression systems inside waste trucks and the effects of the bin being thrown around at the facility because they thought it was just grass clippings. The damage to her body was so bad that the coroner could not determine her cause of death. And sadly, this element of the case had a detrimental impact on the trial. However, the case comes together very quickly. Over July 7th and 8th, 2024, police traced the bin back to Annette's street and matched DNA and fingerprints from the bin to Stephen Fleming. Because let's not forget, he already had a criminal record. He probably had his prints on file. He was arrested about a week after the crime took place. From here, the case moved quickly into the courts. At first, prosecutors charged Fleming with murder. Initially, Fleming denied everything. He's trying his luck. When asked how he would plea, he pleaded not guilty. So, with that said, the case was set to go to trial. But because the cause of death could not be determined, the prosecution had a problem. They could prove that he killed her, but they couldn't prove exactly how or with what intent. But eventually, Fleming agreed to plead guilty to manslaughter, which I think is a bit of a slap in the face to Annette's family and friends, who just wanted to see justice served. It's actually an outcome that we see quite often in cases of domestic violence, and it's quite infuriating. But the judge accepted the plea, noting that his admission confirmed her death occurred in unlawful and dangerous circumstances. But the story doesn't end there, because Stephen Fleming did everything he could to avoid facing the consequences. He refused to board the prison van on multiple occasions, including on the day of his sentencing. At one point, the court had to charter an extra van just to get him there, such was his disdain for the justice system. When he finally arrived, he covered his face. He slumped in the dock and refused to look at Annette's family. His behaviour was described as showing grave disrespect. So let's move on to the sentencing. On November 13, 2025, Justice Christopher Beale, who we also know from his harsh sentencing of Erin Patterson earlier this year, well, he sentenced Stephen Fleming to just 10 years in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 7 years. That's just 7 years before he's eligible for release. Just 7 years for killing a woman who took him into her home, her safe space. Justice Beale highlighted several things that struck him during the course of this trial. The first was that Annette was vulnerable. Fleming had shown profound disrespect by disposing of her body like rubbish. He attempted to destroy evidence by cleaning the home and swapping the bins. He had a long criminal history, and he was already on a community corrections order at the time that he moved into Annette's house. So why the short sentencing? You've got to be wondering about this just the same as I am. Well, because the cause of Annette's death couldn't be determined in the post-mortem, Justice Beale couldn't apply the higher sentencing range that comes with murder or certain aggravated manslaughter findings. It's unfortunate to me also that they couldn't put some sort of abuse of a corpse on him or something like that, just to add to the sentence. Even though a manslaughter charge can hold up to 25 years in prison, because we don't have any evidence to suggest the manner of Annette's death or the circumstances that led up to it, Fleming can't be given that maximum sentence. This case is an example of how the limitations of forensic evidence can shape the outcome of a case. And that brings us back to the bigger picture here. I hazard a guess that if we knew the full extent of his crimes within that house, we'd be looking at a minefield of charges. Who knows what he got up to inside that house? All we know is that for at least the next 7 years, this guy will be kept behind bars. So let's talk about Annette's legacy. While all the details of the legal proceedings of course matter, I want to bring the focus back to the person at the centre of this story. Annette Brennan was not just a victim of murder. She was a kind teacher who helped countless people learn English, find a community, and start new lives here in Australia. She was deeply respected by Melbourne's Indonesian-speaking community. She was warm, patient, and she trusted people. Her friend Nan Austin said, quote, "No one should die like that and be stuffed in a wheelie bin as trash." And she's right. Because people like Annette are the true backbone of society. Teachers who give their time, their energy, and sometimes even their homes to others. People who choose kindness, even when they don't have to. That was the type of person that Annette seems to have been. Having said that, Annette's story is a sad reminder of how important it is to listen to our instincts. Annette saw the red flags, and she wasn't able to get help. This case hits hard because it feels very preventable. Annette did nothing wrong. She was a nice person, but Stephen Fleming was a man who had a long criminal history. He was on a community corrections order. He had been behaving erratically from the moment he got there to Annette's house, and he created escalating conflict from that point. He was nothing but trouble. And yet there were no interventions and no support. My question is, why didn't he have a corrections officer checking his new home and meeting Annette? Shouldn't they have started an active relationship with her as his housemate? Shouldn't that officer have been checking in, asking how things were going? But no, he was free to move into the home of a woman who had no way of knowing his background. And apparently he was under no obligation to tell her. So this situation raises questions about how we manage risk, how we supervise offenders, and how we protect vulnerable people who open their doors to strangers. And if you work in the corrections industry, what are your thoughts on this? I would love to get your opinion. Thank you everyone for spending time with me and hearing Annette's story. Stories like this aren't easy, but I think they're really important to talk about. If you or anyone you know needs support from a domestic violence situation, you can contact your local police station or 1-800-RESPECT. So until next time, everybody, I'll see you at sundown.